A little over 3 months ago, the new Chainsaw Man Recency movie was released in the United States. Both the sales and the reception towards the movie have been extremely positive, which is great news for Chainsaw Man fans. With positive reception comes positive scores on websites like myanimelist, Kitsu, and AniList, with Mal being the most popular of these sites. As of me writing this script, the movie is currently ranked at number 2 of all time on Mal, which has led to several conversations on Twitter and other sites about Mal's ranking system. Despite a large number of people scoring the new movie a 1 out of 10 score on the website, likely as an attempt to combat the influx of positive scores, the Recency arc still ranks near the very top of the all-time lists. Seeing this movie initially shoot into the top 10 with just about 10,000 votes made me curious about a few things. Is recency bias a problem on Mal? If it is a problem, what is the cause? Are there any solutions to this phenomenon? I'm going to attempt to answer these questions in this video as a passionate anime viewer. I'll run a few thought experiments, cross-reference across several websites, and give my own personal theories based on my findings. One important disclaimer I want to give is that Mal and other ranking sites don't necessarily capture the opinions of the wider anime community, but rather of anime fans who use ranking sites. I'll do my best to distinguish whether I'm talking about the entire community or just the ranking side whenever I talk on a macro level. Without further ado, let's get into my findings and thoughts on recency bias in anime. Before we open any of these websites, I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. When I'm talking about recency bias, I'm referring to the concept that a viewer may rate recent releases more favorably than they would older ones simply based on them being new and fresh. There are several reasons a viewer might fall into this, which I'll cover after the research section. I'm sure some of you are worried that I'm a more pretentious anime fan who favors the older classics and hates newer releases, but I assure you that's not the case. I'm just genuinely curious about the breakdown of the different anime eras on the charts as someone who believes there are fantastic anime from every era. Now that I have all of my disclaimers out of the way, let's get into my process. Today, I'm testing the hypothesis that new anime are ranked disproportionately higher than older anime. To do this, I'm going to be looking at the top 100 rated anime on myanimelist and counting how many of them started releasing this decade. Not in the last 10 years, but in the last 6. If an anime began dropping on December 31st, 2019, it would not be included in the tally, but January 1st, 2020 would be included. I'm also going to go back to the closest date possible in 2015 to check if the numbers are comparable to today, shifting the threshold to the 2010s decade. Finally, I'm going to compare the results to popular TV and film websites, Letterboxd and IMDb, to see if the results track across different mediums. So after the experiment, I figured it would be smart to check the other anime ranking sites as well to see if any of the sites have noticeably stronger recency bias than others. So you'll see that in my experiment as well. Feel free to leave your predictions and play along in the comments. I'm sure you'll be just as surprised as I was with the results. Let's start with the website that had the least amount of recent releases in the top 100. That would be IMDb, which had a staggering 3 movies in the top 100, those being 12th Fail, Dune Part 2, and Across the Spider-Verse. The next lowest was Letterboxd, and we're already jumping to a significantly higher number at 24. I would like to note that the reason I included IMDb and Letterboxd was to determine if this is an anime-specific issue, so I didn't categorize these top 100s at all. You'll see what I mean in a bit. Before I get to where the 2015 Mal list landed, I want to cover the modern websites. The next lowest, to my surprise, was actually myanimelist, which had 51 of the top 100 entries drop in the last 6 years. Okay, that number is pretty high if you ask me, but of course I'll get into some of the potential reasons in a second. The second highest number of 2020's entries was AniList, which had 56. Not that much higher than MyAnimeList, but still an absurdly high number. And finally, we have Kitsu. My jaw dropped to the floor when I first counted. Out of the top 100 anime entries on Kitsu, 77 of them came out in the 2020s decade. That number is genuinely ridiculous. Now that we have our modern numbers, how does the list from a decade ago compare? Now, obviously I can't use the 2020s cutoff in 2015, so I shifted the dates to be in the 2010s decade. Anything after December 31st, 2009 was counted as an example of a recent anime for this experiment. The number of recent anime in the top 100 from a decade ago was 65. Surprisingly enough, this number is slightly higher than it is today, which implies that if recency bias is a problem, it's been a problem for a long time. Before I cover possible explanations for why the numbers came out the way they did, I want to quickly show all of the numbers side by side. It's important to point out that the two websites that don't strictly rank anime have a lower selection of recent releases. It's also important to notice that even a decade ago, there were still more recent releases than older ones in the MAL Top 100. So why is this? Is this an anime fan related issue? What happened to make Kitsu's Top 100 so fresh release favored? I don't know. I was trying to come up with a funny synonym for recency bias. I'm tired of saying this phrase over and over again, bro. The first thing I think should be addressed is the TV and movie database websites. I saw a tweet from user Hayden's Bakery on Twitter that believes the anime website charts are the way they are because only watching anime will make your taste in anime worse. While I agree with the sentiment that people shouldn't cut off entire mediums of entertainment, I disagree with the concept that consuming live-action films makes your taste inherently better. There are surface-level fans that consume every medium of art, as well as overly critical and pretentious fans, with most people falling in the middle of these extremes. I don't think a database being exclusively used for anime is the true culprit, as it's clear from my experiment that the results vary wildly between sites. It's also worth observing that despite the top anime list on Letterboxd containing more shows that are traditionally acclaimed, there's also a clear pattern in the types of shows making it to the top. People tend to collect on the database that most aligns with their tastes, which is part of why there's almost no shonen to be seen on the Letterboxd charts. With this being the case, I want to try to actually address why people who flock to the anime databases tend to favor more recent releases. And before I talk about some of those reasons, I think it's important to mention something that I forgot to write in my script. So the different anime databases clearly have different purposes and rating scales, which is definitely part of why the number is drastically higher on a site like Kitsu, which is less of a ranking site and more of a site to try to find trending and popular anime. I just thought I should clarify that before getting into these explanations, as somebody who primarily uses MyAnimeList. It's very difficult to narrow down to one true explanation for such an elevated amount of recency bias on these sites, but I'll try my best to present the ideas I brainstormed to you all. I'd love to hear some of your theories in the comments as well. As passionate as I am about this topic, I can only come up with so many causes based on my personal observations. I will also note that most of these are just opinions based on anecdotal evidence. Tracking recency bias to the scale required to come up with proper, observable evidence would be too overwhelming for the scope of this video. The first concept I think is worth mentioning is the seasonal anime viewer. While tracking new releases and watching new films and shows isn't an anime exclusive concept, the feeling of community around this practice is inarguably stronger in the anime community. MyAnimeList directly supports this approach to watching anime through some of their layouts, showing how many anime from the current anime release season a user is watching. I want to clarify, before I make my point, that I don't think watching shows seasonally is bad at all. It may not be my personal approach to watching anime, but I totally see the appeal, and I respect many people who do it. However, I do think this approach may partially explain why newer shows have slightly inflated scores. In practically every anime release season since the beginning of time, you have three types of anime that pop up. You have genuinely successful and impressive anime that people will still be discussing for decades to come, anime that completely bombed and disappointed thousands of fans, and generic cash grab attempts that are quickly forgotten. Cash grabs tend to change shape with trends, and as explained in this awesome video by fellow YouTuber The Bellman, you can usually decipher which anime are cash grabs by looking back 2 or 3 years to see which popular shows they attempted to emulate. Despite the countless cash grab anime releasing every season, seasonal viewers are not ones to discriminate. The search for a hidden gem or deep cut is enticing, and so many seasonal viewers will watch as much as they can from a release season. With proper identification of the generic from the novel, I would genuinely have zero issues with this. It just seems to me that when looking at some of these rating scales that seasonal viewers use, the average score of many different anime will go up. If you click on pretty much any seasonal show on Mal, you'll pretty much always see the average person giving it a 7 out of 10, even if it's complete unoriginal trash. I'm not saying that people can't have their own unique rating scales or that their rating scales have to match mine. I've just noticed that this ranking approach seems to be far more common with seasonal watchers. Another thing that's important to look into is the general community's opinions on animation quality. There is a decently large section of the community that believes that newer equals better when it comes to animation, and I believe that many of these people miss the true purpose of animation. At its core, animation is stringing a series of images together to depict movement in a realistic or believable way. Animation, when viewed through this lens, has not only been competent, but excellent for several decades now. While I personally think the average anime's quality has gone up considerably over the years, there have almost always been well-animated shows and movies coming out. I've seen countless examples of people using animation as a ranking criterion in their reviews, but many of these people value animation strictly on how flashy it is. This line of thinking has likely contributed to the remake boom, which, for the most part, is just another form of cash grabbing by these animation studios. It's also likely part of the reason that newer shows are sometimes evaluated a little less strictly than older ones. It's gotten to the point that people are asking for remakes of anime that still look fantastic by today's standards, just because they don't look like Solo Leveling or Demon Slayer. The final potential cause I'd like to talk about relates to why recency bias seems to have been worse a decade ago. After taking a look at Google Trends, it seems like myanimelist's popularity peaked around late 2015, which just so happens to be the time frame I went back to using the Wayback Machine. I thought it might be worth presenting the idea that fresh users flooding into the website leads to more recency bias, and that could be why the results were more extreme in October 2015. I think it's an interesting idea to maybe try going back to one day every year in the past 10 years to see if this pattern has any weight. I won't be doing that in this video, but if there's interest for it, I will definitely consider making a video on it. So, now I've left you all with plenty of complaints and possible reasons for this recency bias epidemic, but do I have any actual solutions to propose? Well, calling my ideas solutions is a bit silly, especially when considering the magnitude of this problem. Ultimately, the average scores of thousands of anime series only matter within the database they're being observed on, and most people probably don't mind what the numbers say. But for the people who care, these are the best ideas I could come up with. None of these ideas are perfect, and each has its fair share of problems, but maybe one of these ideas could serve as a catalyst to get the ball rolling. The first idea I have revolves around the timing at which you can review an anime. This point specifically pertains to myanimelist, as that's the website I primarily use. On Mal, there's a review feature where users can write reviews on anime they've watched. There are several things I respect about this feature, like how you can sort by positive or negative reviews, spoiler or spoiler-free reviews, and, most importantly, you can see if someone made a review before finishing an anime. This preliminary tag is essential to this feature, and does a great job of appeasing both seasonal viewers and viewers who watch far into the future. My idea is for scores that are submitted before the end of the anime airing to have something along the lines of a preliminary weighting. That way, seasonal viewers can still rank anime as they watch, and the shows can still appear on the rankings, but anime that have one episode out won't immediately shoot above proven classics. I do think this solution isn't fully complete though. For example, would a preliminary score at episode 1 be weighed the same as one from episode 11? Would this preliminary scoring be extended to past anime, considering users who scored them when they had it marked as watching on the website? And on that note, Mal's watching status is finicky at best and almost entirely relies on people being honest. Won't people then just be able to bypass these restrictions and have even more power with their scores? It's tricky, which is why my friend came up with another solution. The other idea, which I certainly prefer less, is a time-elapsed system. It's very easy to see brand new anime shoot to the very top of Mal after one episode and think, there needs to be restrictions on this. One of my friends suggested that rating a brand new anime over an 8 out of 10 score should not be allowed for the first 3 months it airs. While I think this is a fairly extreme approach, it would definitely lead to fewer extreme cases of recency bias. I just fear that this could lead to bigger problems, such as scores being massively deflated or older anime getting an unfair advantage. Many users would simply forget when they're allowed to adjust their score, leading to some anime that genuinely deserve the higher ratings being suppressed. The length of a series is also very important to look at. An anime like Blue Box wouldn't be nearly as affected as something like Takapi's Original Sin, and movies would either have to be excluded from the rule or butchered score-wise. So if the 3-month rule of higher scores doesn't work, is there a number or time period that would? It's really tough to say, and I honestly don't have a great answer to that question. If it's between incorporating a number and time period I brainstorm, or keeping the current system, I'd pick the latter every time. It honestly feels like this issue might be too big to solve, or maybe it doesn't need to be solved at all. Like I said earlier, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this somewhat mundane issue in the comments. I had a blast scrolling around these sites and looking at how others rate things, as well as the differences between the sites. If you'd like to see more of me discussing current trends in the anime community, you can check out this video I made on the controversial ranking literally every anime ever video. Or if you want to see me analyzing several different anime in a new and unique way, you can check out my video, Time Loops in Anime. Thanks for watching, team, and I hope to see you in the next video.